Hey everyone, welcome to Devs in the Shed. So today we are going to be looking at App Runner in particular, one of the newer AWS services. We're going to have a look through some of the other announcements that we've got. So Devs in the Shed is really about getting a bit more hands-on with the tools. We play with Internet of Things devices like Raspberry Pis a lot of the time. We solder things in our sheds, as you saw last week. We were playing with breadboards as well. So yeah, you've got Paul, our co-host for the day, on the right-hand side of the screen there. So he is a solution architect based out of Melbourne, and you've got myself, Matthew Coles, and I'm one of the technical account managers based out of Melbourne as well. Interested to hear where everyone's from in the chat, so give us a call out. We'll be monitoring the entire time. We want this to be collaborative and a bit more hands-on as well. Today we'll be touching a little bit of code, I think, during the session. But firstly, I did want to go through some of the release notes because we've actually had quite a few things appear in the last couple of weeks. So I might hand over to you, Paul. Do you want to take everyone through it?
Yeah, there was a couple of releases that have come out in the last few weeks. And yeah, it's a good idea to touch on some of those. Do you just want to put my screen up, Matt?
Yeah, it should be up right now.
Yep, great. All right, so we'll have a look at the AWS News Blog and have a little bit of a look at some of the new and interesting features that might have come out. And one of them that both Matt and I, we sort of had a look at, but we weren't 100% clear on what it was. But there's the new service, AWS Bug Bust. So Matt, had you had a look at this service? I had a brief read around it.
I've only had like 2 seconds. It looks like a bug finding program. I think there was a video that went on the AWS YouTube that I just saw like 30 seconds of. Let's have a read together.
Yeah, well, I sort of had a bit of a look in it, and it sort of looks like what this is doing is, I guess, gamifying your ability to like fix the bugs and issues that are appearing within your code. For anybody within the audience that's worked within a team that has said, look, we've got some bugs in the code, or we've got some issues, or maybe some security issues, or some piece of code that runs inefficiently. I'm sure everybody has experienced the pain when you work in an environment that's like maybe like a agile-centric environment where you're going ahead and you're assigning a task for the week and trying to like get the business to do some buy-in to go ahead and address some of these bugs or some of these issues that are there. I think like what this service does is help encapsulate all of that together and take advantage of some of those machine learning-based services like Code Guru and the Code Guru Profiler. Take some of those findings and put that in some sort of like gamified engine, and then provide that as a platform that the team can go ahead and allocate themselves like, a day of, bug busting and effectively gamify working through a backlog of items that need to be addressed.
That's actually kind of cooler than what I thought it was originally, reading through that. So it's kind of a way that we can kind of wrap another service that uses multiple services under the hood to kind of help customers resolve bugs with a few different capabilities. Because I mean, as everyone kind of knows, they're tricky to catch, right? You've got your behavior testing, you've got unit testing, you have code reviews, but things still always sneak through at the end of the day. And I was a really big fan of Code Guru when it came out, Reviewer, and I think that was a fantastic service. I know, Paul, you played around with that as well, but this probably makes it a lot easier for people to kind of consume, right?
Yeah, well, I've used it a lot, and I think at some point in time we'll probably do a little bit of an overview of like the Code Guru Reviewer and the Code Guru Profile and what that can bring to your environment, to your team. But like taking the outputs of that and putting into something like this, is pretty good. And it kind of looks like here that even if you set up these private events, and that event would be like private to your organization and to work through that specific, code base and those challenges, that behind the scenes, each time you're closing out those bugs, AWS will collect the information of the, not necessarily about the bugs that's been closed off, but that you have closed off bugs and allocate points to you. So there's like a global leaderboard there. So I feel like they've taken gamification to a pretty good level, and you can win like t-shirts and like jackets and a trophy. I mean, look, I think, I can't remember what you're wearing right now, but I assume you're wearing some sort of hoodie. I'm wearing like a hoodie, like an AWS hoodie today. So I think most of us tend to like to get something that's nice and AWS branded and wear that around. So I think that's a good reason to have a look at this thing and take it for a go.
Yeah,
and maybe
and I think
we can spin it
I've
up.
definitely been running out of like jumpers, right, and hoodies. So I'm wearing AWS financial services like puffer jacket. I don't really know what they call it, but I have that. I have my reInvent t-shirt from 2019. And the other one that I was wearing today, just the normal regular hoodie, I had to take it off as we started filming because coincidentally my cats had slept on it overnight. And so it was just full of cat hair. And I was like, no. So it's going in the wash. So, yeah, I'd be tempted to get some extra merch, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I know one of my friends, and we're hoping to get him on one week. He's done a lot of work around AWS Deep Racer. He showed me a picture this morning that he got of like these special Deep Racer socks. Now, I know from reInvent 2019 when I was over there, I filled my drawer full of socks. But a couple of years later now, I'm sort of looking to start to replenish that list of socks there. So, I would be interested in getting some more swag in my drawers there.
Nice.
One of the other interesting ones that came out, and Matt and I we deliberated a little bit whether or not we should do today's show on App Runner or take a look at the AWS Step Functions Workflow Studio. Like I've been using Step Functions like on and off through various different projects, and the tool that provides you on how to build up those state machines was it was helpful, but most of what you needed to do was all done through code and could be a little difficult once you'll start just getting used to that service. So if you were somebody that is still not quite doing everything through code and automating everything through code, some of these features and functions can be really, really handy to start visualizing what you're seeing and start stitching those workflows together. So I think that's been like quite an interesting release. And I know Marcia, who has her own YouTube channel, Fubar, she did a pretty good video about that. So if anybody's interested in that, look up on YouTube Marcia Villabilia and have a look at her videos around that. So that was pretty interesting. And also that they've introduced a public registry for AWS CloudFormation. And so, I mean, I still have, and even today, Matt and I were sort of discussing some options around once you've built services, like just providing a link to a CloudFormation YAML template somewhere is, it's one thing. What about if somebody says, look, I want a specific construct in my environment, and that's like CDK, I have to pull down the code and I have to provision all of this sort of work here.
Yeah.
So,
like if I just want free tier architecture or something like that for, quick example project or something using like Postgres, that's kind of handy to be able to share around.
Yeah, so that was another interesting one as well. I'm not quite sure how that works. So there must be some sort of, you've got to be a verified publisher and publish into the marketplace or something like that. But pretty interesting if you are building something that is like a pre-configured type of environment that you can publish that to other people to be able to pull that in and have that public. And I guess that falls off that decision of, and we will touch on that today, like Amazon's ECR public registry as well. People are looking to be able to distribute their applications, and whether that be infrastructure or the application itself. And it's really good to see that AWS is, taking that into consideration and building up some of these public services for us. So let's go back to what App Runner is now. To introduce App Runner, and I guess when I first saw it, and I don't know about you, Matt, but did you think is this Beanstalk version 2?
I was kind of 50-50 because I was like, ECS has been relatively easy for me to use, and this kind of looks like it does use ECS or EKS under the hood, like in terms of AWS container services. So I was like, how much simpler can we make that for everyone? But I did have a read yesterday, and I've played around with it a tiny bit yesterday. So I'm really, really new to it. And I think the whole purpose is similar to what they've got with Lambda or Amplify, where it's like, here's my code, and there's only going to be a few configurations on top overall, and I should get something deployed with App Runner and under the hood, like, have that launched on ECS, but not have to worry about all the settings and configurations that I would normally. So it seemed like a simpler way to get into ECS maybe. But you're kind of right. Like, I hadn't really thought about Elastic Beanstalk V2. Hadn't really thought about it that way as well. But I guess you're right. Yep.
Yeah, had you ever used Elastic Beanstalk?
Yeah, I've used it for a number of projects, especially when I need to get something out quick, and I've been a little bit lazy. So mostly Python and Express.js apps that I've built. And I've got like maybe a database, and I've just needed to example something, and I didn't want to have to fully build out an account to support a particular example app.
Yeah. Well, maybe for anybody in the audience, and we're watching and listening to your feedback there. Has anybody been using Elastic Beanstalk like in production? Prior to working at AWS, I was working on some projects, and we were using Elastic Beanstalk in production, and it did. I mean, the way we used it was the company was a a bit of it was a startup company, so they needed to move like at a reasonable pace. Things had to get going like pretty fast, and we'd spend a lot of time figuring out exactly what it was that the customer wanted. And so we found that by using Elastic Beanstalk and provisioning and building an application in a container, it took care of a lot of that, configuring an ECS cluster, whether we were using Fargate or not. And at the time, Fargate wasn't available. We didn't want to have like EC2 instances. We didn't want to think about hosting that. And really, we used Elastic Beanstalk in a very simplistic method that we said we wanted to deploy into this VPC, and we want you to use this container. And then we set some metrics around whether or not that container should, scale out at certain points in time. But we weren't using it to configure our database or anything complicated like that. We were just pushing a few environment variables in. And because that application was actually like really simple, and we didn't have the time to set up like in the beginning like proper build pipelines. We didn't have anything automated in that. So the Elastic Beanstalk, we used ClickOps all the way through to go ahead and provision that environment. And later we built a pipeline that would push a change to the container and trigger Beanstalk to re-provision that. So, it is quite a handy service, and it is being used by a lot of customers. And I guess when I saw App Runner, it made me think of Elastic Beanstalk v2. Now, I know that it's in a really early release point at time here, so it's the feature set is kind of limited, but I sort of will take through a little bit about like what it does and how it works, and I'll take us through a little bit of a demo of taking an existing very, very simple app, packaging that into a container, and then deploying that into App Runner. But secondly, it's not just for a containerized workload. So if you have, and at the moment there's only 2 runtimes supported, but if you have a Python, application or a Node.js application, it will go ahead and hook itself into a repository and suck that code up. You set some build configurations around that. You set some run configurations around that, and it will go and I guess behind the scenes it is putting it in a container somewhere. I'm not exactly sure when you use that method of this deployment, but goes ahead and runs your application and provides you with a nice HTTP endpoint for that.
I think the documentation actually did specifically call out ECS, so I think they've been quite transparent behind that. Just going through the comments though, we've got developer Steve. He's done a little bit of work with digital agencies for SPAs or single page applications. So he's done some app deployments for it, but he's done a lot of work in non-prod as well. So just to call out there, so that's pretty cool. I kind of maybe I didn't word my my answer as to whether I'd used it too well. But prior to being at AWS, I'd never actually really played too much with AWS services. So a lot of the stuff that I would have done at my previous work, I would have leaned on Beanstalk heavily. Because I always think that like the tools should work for us at the end of the day. As developers, we've got a lot to focus on in the code and unit testing and all these other bits and pieces. It's nice when things can kind of abstract away the deployment methodology. And, I guess that's why developers love Docker and these types of services. The other thing that I was going to say is I did see a comment from Quan TTB. So I've never done Git or GitHub, but passed the Solution Architect Associate, so congrats. That's really cool. Trying to change careers, but it's seemingly impossible at this moment, and studying how to deploy services and automate through Git actions now. I think you're definitely on the right path. I was going to say, keep it up. It's quite hard to get into technology, and especially like the cloud space. there's a lot of like assumed knowledge. But if you're past just a solution architect associate, you've done really well to begin with, and you can start to investigate like DevOps, CI/CD, kind of learn a lot of those tools, and spend some time with CloudFormation and CDK. And I think you'll get there eventually. I think give it maybe 6 months or so, and then you might be at that level. But what I can say is people with cloud skills are quite rare on the market. So so if you kind of double down and spend the time to do things right, it's definitely worth doing, right? Like we've got a massive shortage at the moment, and we just can't find enough hands in cloud across the board with all of our customers. So you'll definitely have a spot. I don't know if you want to say anything else to that, Paul, but maybe as a next step on certification, maybe the developer cert will help you learn some of that CI/CD stuff as well. If you want to go down the cert path and have that forced style of learning where you're aiming towards the goal of getting certified, and that makes you learn the services around.
Yeah, the developer associate and then the DevOps Pro, which is the professional part of that, is really focused around that track of thinking. But interestingly, there's another question here from E7 Twitch. Does AWS have a store for merch? So that comes right off the back of that, exactly what we're talking about. And I quickly looked that up. But when you are certified, there are benefits for, with official AWS certified merchandise. Actually, that hoodie that I'm wearing now is one of those. So once you have completed your certificates, and there are different levels for different certificates, you have access to the AWS certified store. And there are all sorts of things that you can get, like key rings, hats, t-shirts, hoodies, a whole bunch of things. So that is one way where you can go ahead and get certified AWS certified merch. But to just go ahead and buy I guess lots of it, that's the only store I'm aware of that has verified AWS merchandise.
Well, the other thing is, if you participate in like a lot of the industry events, go to any of the major IT shows, AWS is usually there with merch, Rubik's cubes as well, socks, etc. But usually, like in each local city, we're running some kind of event. It could be a hackathon, immersion day. It could be a Highlander. If you're in Australia as well, we do a lot of those. And so those events give you a bit of an option to get some additional unique merch for attending and being a participant. Usually, if you're working for a particular customer or brand, and you've got an AWS team that's there as well, you can always hound them for some merch. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, it's co-branded. So you sometimes have the name of your company and then the AWS logo. And I've gotten a ton of my really cool shirts from that. And it also helps me kind of celebrate working with customers and solving problems.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go back to have a look at. We roughly know what AWS App Runner is. It's some mechanism to deploy and host containers, or some mechanism to deploy and host either a Python or an Node.js app. So in your AWS console, you can go ahead and search for App Runner and click on that service there. It is available at the moment only in a few different regions. So it's not available all over the place. It is a pretty early release, and so we have to be forgiving about the features that may not exist at this point in time. I've just chosen North Virginia. I did set one up earlier so we can have a look through it, if just in case the live coding example fails. But what we'll do is we'll go all the way through, like configuring a pre-existing application that both Matt and I sort of worked on on the weekend. We quickly whipped something up. And what I'm going to do is we have this repository that we've built, and we'll paste this to the YouTube channel, and Matt can go ahead and paste it into the chat if you want to go ahead and have a look now. But we've got like a really simple application, and this application is basically just displaying like some HTML, a little bit of CSS to do some fancy animations. And everybody can have like a little bit of a chuckle of what it is. But instead of just going ahead and deploying like the standard Nyan Cat or something like that, we thought we'd build our own little devs in the shed test container. And I figured what we'd do is we'd probably start all the way from scratch and just show how, if I had literally nothing other than a GitHub repository with a basic containerized application, how I could go and build that, deploy that, and host it into AWS. using App Runner. And also, as part of that, I wanted to provide access to the viewers themselves if they want to go ahead and deploy that themselves. I was going to set up Amazon ECR, a public registry, where you can go ahead and pull that container and build that in your environment as well. So to do that, I'm going to use Cloud9. And for anybody that is unaware of what Cloud9 is, Cloud9 is a web-based IDE that AWS provides. It sets up a Amazon Linux 2 EC2 instance behind the scenes. You can also use Ubuntu if you want to. And on top of that, it has a number of, the common tools that you're probably likely to go ahead and use. And I think I've talked about this before, but a nice little web-based IDE, has Python installed, has Node installed, has CDK installed there for you. And we're not going to do anything too fancy today other than run, we will be running like a very small Python app, but effectively all I'm going to do is go ahead and build and publish this container. And so while that's spinning up, and because I know what I'm going to do here, I am going to create a new ECR repository. So our like the AWS ECR repository is exactly like what you would expect to see at Docker Hub. And you can create private and public repositories. And the public repositories came very late last year. And this has been really handy, especially since Docker Hub has put its ability to do rate limiting in. And so what this means is that if you have an application that's running within the AWS environment, you can go ahead and pull from those repositories, or if you needed to publish those publicly, and it will sort of auto-magically use the account that you're pulling from to register against that repository, so you don't suffer from the same rate limiting that you do if you were using a machine within the AWS IP web space, if you're trying to consume those images from Docker Hub. So I'm going to create a new public ECR repository. I'll just call it like devs in the shed. It'll be public. I'll put a logo on it for that. This will be probably running Windows actually. So the architecture, I can't remember what the base image was, but I'm pretty sure that's an ARM compatible base image that we use to do that.
Cool.
You can provide some additional information. You can go ahead and change this later. I think all of this renders, it's Markdown. So you can use Markdown in here to do some highlighting and whatever you need to go ahead and put in there. So I'll create that repository. So for anybody that's not aware, when you are using Docker Hub on your local machine, you can just do a Docker pull and pull an image without having to authenticate and log in. Now, if you do a Docker login and authenticate against Docker Hub, then that rate limiting is changed. So you're not acting as a public or an anonymous member. And so therefore the rate limiting becomes easier for you to deal with and to maintain. So that's how you go ahead and get around the rate limiting factors of using Docker Hub. But that can be a bit of a pain. Then you have to inject extra environment variables, or you have to store the username and password somewhere, and all these sorts of things. So, but with this application here, with ECR, we're doing the exact same thing. So we're going to log in from that environment, and effectively here, what it will do is it'll call the AWS CLI command to get a login password. I'll pass that across to the Docker login, and I'll log in my application directly to my ECR repository. I will build a container in a second, then I'll tag that container, and then I'll push it up into this repository. So that Cloud9 instance looks like it's spun up now. And I'll take this repo, and we'll clone that. So a very, very tiny little repo, and I'll take us all through what this is. So the Docker file is incredibly small, so it's just the Nginx Alpine image. I'm not sure if that's a multi-arc image or not, so I ticked all those boxes. It might not work on ARM. And really all we've got is an index file and a couple of images, and we're just going to copy all of that into the Nginx HTML folder, which will allow us to run this application on port 80 and display what's in that index.html, which is really, we just put 3 images, and then Matt put in a bit of fancy CSS to move and animate some of those images around. So now I've got my application that's built. I've cloned that. It's got a Docker file.
I tried to make it look like 90s websites, so I'm hoping everyone enjoys it.
Yeah, it's like it's like Marquee.
Marquee, Blink, all those fancy HTML effects that like you just needed on your website back in the 90s. So we'll see what it looks like when it gets up.
So
does anyone actually remember those days? Has anyone ever used some of those? Yeah, there we go.
It reminds me of the $1 per pixel website as well.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So we've logged into, we've got that login password. We've passed it across the Docker login, and I've authenticated against my ECR repository within this environment. I've run a Docker build, so I've built that container. Because that's a tiny little container, it takes practically no time at all to build. I'll go ahead and I'll tag that container. And now I'll go ahead and I'll push that up into ECR. Okay, so if we were to go into ECR at the moment and have a look, we should see for devs in the shed that we've got one container that's been pushed into that environment that's tagged as latest. And if you were to go to ECR public gallery, I'm not quite sure how fast this comes up. Let's have a look. Maybe we'll just like shed, we should find it. Yeah, so it's come up already, and we can see that we've got 0 downloads. Maybe we changed I'm not sure with the logo there. I thought maybe that
icon actually kind of looks like a shipping crate, not a shed, but that's fine.
Yes, so I might have to look. Maybe I did the wrong size or something with that. We'll worry about that another time. But with App Runner, we're going to create a brand new service. I'm going to use a container registry for that, and I'm going to use Amazon ECR public. So if we were to go to here, I know that is the path that is expected. Make sure that you put a tag in there as well. It won't automatically default to the latest tag. For this automatic changes to the registry, if it's a public ECR setting, you don't have the option of automatic deployments. It must be because it's like takes it out of your control, so it's a little bit risky. You could effectively break your environment if you're using one of these public image.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a manual deployment trigger setting, and we'll talk through the automatic stuff when Matt goes through his piece. So we'll call that dev shed. So we're creating a new service that is going to go ahead and deploy this container. The container is really lightweight, so we don't need too much, extra vCPU or any extra memory. But as you can see here, in its current form, App Runner doesn't provide a whole lot of granularity around what we should be being able to provide to our container. Or the
it's
service.
Still cool. You've got environment variables there, and you've got the ability to specify a port. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So you can go ahead and you can add environment variables, and they might be used for the container to do some configuration or something like that. For the port, and I specifically remember that container was exposed on port 80, so I'll just adjust that. But let's have a look through some of the additional configurations. So there might be a mechanism here to override, and let's just say you had a public container that starts up and runs in a default demo mode. But if you were to override that entry point in that run command, you can go ahead and pass that in as well. It does give us the option to configure and change auto scaling. So the default configuration says basically at 100 concurrent requests, 1 is the minimum instance size, maximum instance size of 25. But maybe we'll go ahead and I'll change that. And what was just test. So maybe I'll drop that concurrency down to 1. We'll see if we can get some auto scaling happening. And maybe I'll just change the minimum size to 2, maximum size is between 1 and 25 for that. So this is, really basically very, very easy auto scaling options. It will provision load balancers and all the targeting groups behind the scenes for you. But this should, I think the way I interpret this is concurrency should be just 1 request per container, and once it starts to go over the top of that, it should start to auto scale. We can configure TCP health checks for this environment, and we can set the timeout. I want this to adjust itself really quickly, so I'll put these times really, really low, or maybe I'll leave that there. That way, it should spin up really fast without having to wait a long time before it's getting a healthy instance that's be able to place in that target group. And you can set and configure the instance role. So if your container or application was, interacting with SQS or S3, you would go ahead and define that role and apply that role over the top of it, so that again, no security or authorization is embedded into the container itself. We'd advise against any type of credential embedding within the container, and use an instance role to go ahead and do that. You can also adjust the AWS KMS key if you want to, bring your own and configure that up as well. And as with almost every service that we've got, you can add some tags to do some classification of that. So I'll go ahead and click next, which just gives us this overview of, just to go ahead and look at what we are going to do. Again, just making sure that I'm going to pull that image down, one vCPU on port 80, everything else pretty much standard, except that hopefully we can see some auto scaling events if we do some load testing there. So basically at this point, in theory, I should have an application that will deploy what's running in that container into production. Now, I haven't run the container locally to show you what it is, but once that's deployed, we should be able to go ahead and see that. Now, it does take a couple of minutes to push that out, but in the meantime, in a service that I haven't touched at all, and so Matt and I really only had a quick look at this morning, so we're relatively unfamiliar. And what I might do is just, because I haven't been looking at the comments, Matt, are there any comments or any questions?
Steve Condy did ask, is Quantum Compute Service available to public? So you can use Bracket. If you look up Bracket within the AWS services within your console, Bracket should be open for people to play with quantum computing, although it's all early days, right? Yep. Call out in the chat if you've actually, what you guys think of this. I'm sure quite a few of you might have done some work with containers. I'd gather your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the chat of App Runner so far, and let me know if you've used ECR as your container registry before as well. But
what other container platforms that people are using? What's their preference? Are we Kube fans here, or
Docker Swarm maybe as well?
Yeah. But it looks like there's a feature here to do custom domains. Now, I'm going to make an assumption here that if I go ahead and add this domain, is it going to set up all the DNS records and so forth for us? I'm not really sure. So I did delegate our old random site.site domain into this account. So as you can see, I have no records in DNS. However, the name servers are pointing to this. So if I make a change to DNS, it'll make live and real changes. So let's go ahead and see if we can add a custom domain to that.
You're missing your row. Yep.
And that site as well. So let's see if this works. Oh, okay. I can't do it while the service is provisioning. We're going to have to wait.
It shouldn't take too long to provision, though. I think when I did it last night, it only took 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah. While that is provisioning, and while I've
actually have a look at the logs. Let's see what provisioning looks like. What shows up in the log section?
It looks like it is performing the health check on port 80. It's pulled the image. Operation in progress, and service creation has started. So I guess it's and it'll be interesting to see what these logs sort of differentiate. So let's have a look at this log here. This application log.
I'll go to the deployment logs actually, because that's what we should be looking at. Application logs is once it's launched. So it hasn't done too much other than pulled the image there.
Yeah,
but if you go back to the main section, I can see that it's doing health checks. So it looks like it's deployed. Yeah. And it's doing health check on, I think this is the part that takes the longest amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While that is kicking along there, Matt introduced me to, we were talking about how we could try and demonstrate the scaling of this environment, and we fiddled around with JMeter for a little bit, and we looked at some other tools, and Matt introduced me to a program that I haven't seen before, which is with Locust. Yeah, and so I'll bring that up quickly. So Locust is a little app that runs in Python. It's completely open source and enables you to host your own load testing environment. And so what I thought I would do is just go ahead and set that up, because it is actually like incredibly easy to set up and get running. I was actually surprised. I thought it was going to be a lot harder. So I'm going to use that same Cloud9 environment to host this Locust application. So I'll just make a directory, cd into that. We pip3 install Locust. That'll do its thing. And really all it requires once that's installed is a Locust file. And inside that Locust file, we define effectively a task. Now you can go ahead and define a number of different tasks and configurations so that you can run within your application. But at its really basic, the most basic piece that you can get to that, this itself is all you really need to get a load testing environment up and running. Because I'm running in Cloud9, so by default, Locust runs on port 8089. Because I'm running in Cloud9, I want to preview the application. I'll just pass this additional parameter to the web host port to port 8080. So I've started up my Locust application, but I want to interact with that. So I'll preview that running application. And for those that were maybe new to Cloud9, might not know that even if you're in Cloud9, you might think, well, how do I go ahead and view like localhost? You can do it. It has a special like loopback proxy that works in here. And even if I was to copy this URL and pass that to somebody else, they would be able to see it. So it's all authenticated, and it uses all the credentials around me operating within this environment to gain access to the local instance of this little web server that's running. And so here's the dashboard. Like, so if we were to think like, how many users do I want to simulate? I'll take 50,000. I'll do like 500 per second, and the host will take this. So once this has gone ahead and deployed.
Yeah, there we go. There's that magic animation.
Yeah. I'll tab back to that in just a second so that I don't forget what I copied there. But if here's the host, and then we're just going to start swarming, and that's just kicked off this load testing environment that's going ahead and just making thousands and thousands of requests to some specific endpoint. So really easy to get up and running, like, less than a minute or so to get up and going.
So you just released your app, Paul, and you've got 50,000 users hitting it up. Like, daily active users look sweet.
Yeah, it looks like looks like the load is working there for everybody. And so this is our great bit of CSS and animations. Instead of having Nyancat, we just got Matt falling over there and me spinning around in the sky. But you can see there, like, really, even if you were just playing around with the proof of concept, this is like super easy to get up, set up and running, and to host the containerized application. Actually, now it says it's running. We'll try that custom domain now and see if we can get that going as well. What will it do? I'm hoping at this point what it will do is give me a button or something that I can click and it'll automatically push those into Route 53, but I might have to manually add them.
No, it looks like it's...
It says it's pending, but
pending. Yeah, check out Route 53. Did it automatically do everything?
I don't think so.
No. So it's just pending validation, so we're probably going to have to add that in then, right?
Yeah.
This is where it's like there's a lot that's still happening with App Runner, right? Like, I've noticed a couple of little things when I was playing with it as well. The good news is they're going to continuously develop this, right? So it's just going to get better and better. Yep.
But it does look like it will make a certificate for us, though, I guess. What was the next scene? Was that right?
Yeah.
This might take a little while to do it, but it'll be interesting to see whether it does work at the end. So I'll leave that ticking along, and we'll see what happens with that, and maybe we'll touch base with that in towards the end of the show. But what we'll do is, while that is doing its thing and thinking, we'll have a look at the logs. So looks like everything's come up. So service is successfully created. And maybe let's have a look at the application logs. I mean, probably nothing is being logged out here, or very minimal. Oh, there we go. So we can see all those requests that are coming through when we're, I mean, this is just the Nginx logging. So we can see that that Python request is going ahead. And I guess that's the public IP of the EC2 instance that I'm using, that Cloud9 is sitting and operating on. But let's have a look at maybe the metrics here and see what we can see, whether or not that's like tried to scale up. And we can see, I can definitely see that in the last few minutes we've had tens of thousands of requests being pushed through. The latency has gone up once we started putting that requests on. And also the active instances begin scaling as well. Now, Locust runs on a single core by default, so we might be inadvertently not seeing multiple concurrent requests at the exact same time. So that might be not triggering auto scaling because it's such a light application. Nginx is probably serving that up in a fraction of a second. So it might take a while, or we might have to configure something up to get active instances scaled really massively if we needed it to. But also, I think the machine that I'm hosting on looks like it threw some sort of error here, actually. So maybe I'll restart that, and maybe I was a little bit 50,000 might be too many requests to go ahead and store that on that specific machine. So I'll go and drop that back down. Take that URL and paste that back in again. Maybe I'll just make it be not so naughty towards my server with this and slow these requests down and see it kick back off. But if we sort of look through there, it does provide us some good metrics on what we're seeing. Not a whole lot, I guess, at the moment, but the ability to add those into your custom dashboards. We have the configuration, which we can go ahead and edit later if we want to. So if we wanted that machine to be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, I'm not sure whether, I think the auto scaling is stuck. You might have to delete it and change that if you wanted to do that. But the source, you could go ahead and you could change that if you needed to. So, I mean, reasonably simple in its, and I guess it's like pretty MVP at the moment, but reasonably simple to get something up and running. But that's like one flow. I think at this point, I'm going to hand over to you, Matt, and show us how you'd go ahead and deploy a Python app.
Yeah, no problems. Yeah, I'm just going to shoot a link in the chat very quickly. So this is the repo that we're going to play around with for the second part. And I guess, Paul, could you get my screen up for everyone to see?
Yep, it's up running.
Perfect. Yeah, so I only started playing with this last night, so I'm fairly fresh to all of it as well. I didn't really want to have too much of a go of it. I wanted to kind of learn with everyone else. But effectively, I've just made this really, really simple Python application. So I'll take everyone through it before we have a look at deploying it into App Runner, and we'll look at it being hosted local as well. So effectively, I just have an index page, and this is all Python Flask based. So I have all my HTML files in the templates folder. You can look through the code if you want to as well on your side. I've loaded in some Google fonts. I have my CSS file for a little bit of styling. I like to have everything looking semi-okay. And then I've just got this form with a couple of different buttons. And you can see that I'm using, if I blow it up a little bit, you can see that I'm using like a couple of the emojis. So rock, paper, scissor. So I wanted to kind of create a little bit of the game, have a bit of fun with it. It only took like an hour or so last night. So it was nice and fun to work on. And you'll choose one of those options. And then once you've chosen an option, what my app's going to do is it's going to lead to the results page. And I'm just using the random function in Python to make a random choice between rock, paper, and scissors as well. And so we compare the choice between what we chose and what the computer chose, and how the game of rock, paper, scissors works in reality. So it's really, really simple, as you can see. Most of the magic is happening in the app.py file. So if we go through here, You can see it is a Flask app. The only library outside of Flask that I'm using is random. I've got some options for the computer to choose from. And then down here, I've got a bit of the logic on the post call to the results page. So this is where the computer is going to make a choice. And it's going to pick from one of those free choices within that list. And then what we're going to do is we're going to then see if we chose the same as the computer, then we tied. If the computer chose paper and we chose rock, or it chose scissors and we chose paper, we kind of go through and we work out whether we actually lost the computer through that logic. And then everything else we basically won, right? So I think those are the three conditions, if I remember rock, paper, scissors as a child. So it's a really, really simple app. I can run it for you guys as well. I've decided to use Gunnercorn for hosting, so I could just run like a Flask run command and it's going to pick up my app.py. But I wanted to use Gunnercorn. I just find it a little bit more reliable. And so what does this app look like in reality? Let's have a peek. So I'll open this up on localhost on my machine. So you can see very, very simple, rock, paper, scissors, choose from the below. If I choose rock, you can see my choice came through into the results page. And I can see that the computer made the wrong choice of scissors. So I won over the computer, which is probably a first. I can try again, and this time I might pick scissors. And you can see that we led to a tie. So it seems like the logic's working. I might give it one more go. I might pick paper this time. And I won over the computer again. Let's see if I can lose against the computer. Tied again. Come on, computer. Won over the computer again. Is it ever going to pick scissors? It should pick scissors at some point.
So,
there we go.
Is it Gunnercorn or is it G Unicorn?
G Unicorn or Gunnercorn. I just yeah, I'm bad with naming. I think you're right though. I think it's G Unicorn.
I wasn't sure. I quickly looked it up and I pasted it into the chat there for anybody.
Yeah. It's kind of like what's that other argument as well around
JPEG or something?
JPEG, like yeah. Oh no, GIF or GIF. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So yeah, my app seems to work. GIF. Yep, my app seems to work. So how do I bring this into App Runner per se? So I might make the App Runner side of the equation a little bit bigger so we can have a proper look at that. So I'll shrink down the code. And there we go. On the App Runner side, I guess I'll navigate to the service first and I'll see what we can do. So if I created a new App Runner service and I choose to grab the source from my GitHub, I can see a list of all my projects that I've got in GitHub at the moment. The repository that I did share on the chat's rps-flask, and it's just the main branch. Deployment trigger is just going to be every time I make a code change. I quite like that. So I'll pick it up from the GitHub repo and then I'll send it across. Now, the next choice is configuring the settings as per how Paul did just beforehand. We can choose Python free, have a build command, and then a start command for your application. So I could do it that way, but what we might do is we might have a look at using a configuration file this time. So I'll probably make a code update and I'll add a apprunner.yaml file to the project. So I'll just add that into the root. There we go. And next, I've got to see what the formats look like. So I've got the documentation open here. You can see the two choices. We did image-based service just beforehand, so you can basically deploy anything like HTML. But in the code-based services, if you're picking up from GitHub, you've got the choice of a Node.js app or a Python app. The cool thing is they do have a few examples of end-to-end applications here. But for the application I've made, it looks like this is kind of what the apprunner.yaml file should look like. So Let's have a look at the 2 snippets. I'm not using Django. I don't probably need everything that fancy. So I might just grab this particular file. And I'm not using pipenv. I was playing with that yesterday. But what I am going to do instead is just do a...
For people that might not have seen that, pipenv is like the continuation or the modern way of doing pip install requirements.
Yeah, that's right. So pipenv is really cool. It'll produce like a what was it, like a pipe lock file, if I remember the formatting correctly from last night, and then it can lock down your requirements. It can port from like your requirements.txt file as well. So if you do migrate over to pipenv in an existing app, it kind of reads that requirements text file and creates its own like pipenv file and pipenv lock file within the root of your project. So I found that quite nice actually. But what am I going to do here? So if I am going to use my configuration file, I think I am simply just going to do like a pip install cursive requirements.txt. And I probably don't need that second command in the build steps, right? So
all these build steps run in a kind of a pipeline is hooked into App Runner. So we don't need to build any sort of pipeline or anything ourselves. It just sort of happens.
Yeah, it just happens. And you can see like you can be as detailed on the specific configurations that you might have for your app, or you can keep things relatively lightweight, right? Like I could define that I want to use Python 3.8.4 if I wanted to, but I've just got the runtime at Python 3. In that build command, if I just pull down all the requirements, I should get like Flask, I should get Gunnercorn and all the associated things there. So I don't think I need to do too much else there. But what I do want to do is I want to run that Gunnercorn command to launch my app. So just make that a little bit better. Gunnercorn bind, localhost, port 8080. I've got a WSGI file there, and that points to my app.py file and then runs my application. So I think that's all I actually need to do for a successful deployment. So what I might do is I might just do git add star, pick up that new file, hopefully. And what am I doing? I was like, why is that taking so long? Just need to kill the application. So it's telling me one of my files is ignored. That's okay. And then I want to do a git commit with a message. And I'll just say added apprunner.yaml. It's the app. And then I'll push that up. So I'll do a git push. That way I've got that file for App Runner to use. Just make sure that commits come in. I can see it's moved to 9, and I've got my App Runner file there. So yeah, I should be in good shape. So I'm going to use that configuration file. Fingers crossed it all works. I was having a little bit of grief last night with it, but we can look at that together if I continue to have some grief. I'm going to call it rock, paper, scissors. Let's keep that service name very simple. Yeah, 1 CPU, 2 gigabytes of RAM should be fine. And I'll leave everything else as default here. So Paul took you through the options beforehand. So I might leave them for now, considering I don't need them. I just simply want to create and deploy. So this might take a little bit longer than Paul's app, I'm thinking, just because Paul already had his image pre-baked, and mine might take
going to have to do the build
minutes.
steps, right?
Yeah, to do all those build steps that I've defined, even though there's not too much. Did your domain work? Did you want to flip back to that very quickly, Paul, or shall we just have a watch of this run?
I was just sort of looking at that, and it hasn't worked. Not the way I expected it to work.
Well, let's have a look at that together then. Yeah.
Okay, just give me a second. Can't log out. I need to log back in again. just go and reshare my screen again.
I've just put it up now.
Okay, so wasn't exactly sure what was happening there because it just sat for a long time. This was the one that we did, the custom domain. Oh, it says it's active. Okay, so it literally just changed at that point in time. Let's see. And it worked. Yeah, it did work.
That's perfect.
Okay,
Awesome.
So, yeah, like literally like 30 seconds ago, it wasn't working, but now it is working. So I guess, I mean, that's pretty handy, really. I'll paste that into the chat if people want to have a look at it themselves.
Nice. So I'm just having a read through the comments as well. I can see rock, paper, scissors, Spock, and lizard Spock. Yeah, I was almost thinking of going down that path, but then I decided to keep it relatively sane to the standard rule set of the game.
So yeah, it did work. Like it created the certificate and attached it all for me. But you do have to go ahead into like your DNS provider, whatever that is, and set those CNAMEs in, and then it went ahead and created that all for you.
Cool.
I'm actually pretty sure, because I was fiddling around manually, that this is not the certificate that it's using. So I think if I delete this certificate, yeah, the certificate it's using here is like transparent to us. Like I don't know where you would see that certificate, but it is not something that we have to think about or look at. So you don't have to go ahead into ACM and do anything. It did it for me behind the scenes. So I created that certificate manually because I was just waiting for such a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you just add those 3 DNS entries, it creates a certificate, holds that for you manually. I mean, I wonder what happens after a year, whether it automatically renews it or not. I'm not sure. But yeah, I actually thought it wasn't going to work. And so when it came up and it did work, I was like, pleasantly surprised. So there you go. Like if you had some sort of small application you wanted to go ahead and deploy, SSL certificate, containerized application, in Matt's case, if you had a build pipeline as well. But if you've already got it in the container itself, you may want to have, I guess it might be interesting to go through and see like how, if you had a private repository, let's do that really quickly while Matt's is deploying. If I was to use, standard ECR, then we have this option to do, I'll just put something in there so that I can use the automatic deployment triggers. I was just wondering what would happen if we, so monitors the registry and deploys a new version of the service for each image push. Right. So if I was to build something in code pipeline that was building my container from my repository and pushing that automatically. So let's just say I was familiar with that, or I had that set up and running in time, or I was using Jenkins or some other sort of CI/CD pipeline. The moment that new image is pushed into ECR within my private registry, that would then deploy the new version of the container. So your build can be completely automatic, and your deployment is completely handled by App Runner in this instance. So yeah, I think that's
nice.
That's pretty handy. Yeah.
By the way, we had Ruggerneck one. Are you using Locust? Just saw you had the documentation open just now. Sorry, just tuned in. It's perfectly fine. We were using it to load test the service beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, we were using Locust, and so I hadn't seen it before today, and Matt sort of showed it to me. And yeah, I think it's really handy. And we were actually chatting about whether or not we could package this up as something that was a little more easy to deploy. And we actually thought it might be fun to package Locust up and be able to deploy Locust through App Runner and just expose that for, private use for yourselves. Like if somebody needed some local load testing, we could actually load test our App Runner applications with Locust running in App Runner. And so we were thinking about something like that as well, and maybe we would wrap Cognito around that to have some authentication, so that even if it was publicly available, and even if it was just for a short amount of time, that you would avoid anybody logging into that account and running some load tests or something. But yeah, it's very, very handy. So I really like it. I think it works really well. I have been running this on my local computer, but it makes my fans go on. So I've tended to want to do that in the cloud. And you can set that up to run as many worker agents that you want per how many cores you have available. So that way you can do concurrent requests and you can get a lot more throughput on your load test.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And by the way, it looks like everyone can play rock, paper, scissors here. So
yeah, pop up your screen, Matt.
Yeah, I'll get my screen up in a second. Do you want to share it with everyone now? I've just opened it up.
Yep.
So rock, paper, scissors is successfully running. I have a default domain. Just because it's a little bit different to containers, we did all the build settings within our apprunner.yaml file beforehand. So I wanted to take everyone through that. So you can see the builds took off at 54 past. I went through and basically installed Flask and all those things from the requirements.txt file. So that's effectively the stage that was running through this pip install are recursively going through and installing each of the different requirements.txt dependencies that I've got there. So like click, Flask, Gunnercorn, etc. It's dangerous. Love the name of that one. Yep. So that all happened well. Then it basically used ECR, I can see here, to create a container image. So basically at that stage, my app's similar to what Paul's using. Because I didn't set a particular version of Python, it's just using 3.85, so I can see that in the log. And running through the rest of it, did a checksum, pulled from ECR, copied my app across, and successfully installed everything, launched the container, exposed port 8080, which is what I was using with Gunnercorn here, as you can see in the run commands. So that's good as well. And then successfully built. And if I go back to the event log itself, I can see the health check was successful and it started routing traffic to the application. So, so I'm all in business. If I go to the app logs like Paul did a second ago, let's have a look.
I think it's a little bit broken, Matt. So something didn't work properly.
Something didn't work properly.
You can't play the game. Yeah, the front page loads, but you can't play the game.
Ah, that's a pity. That's interesting. Wonder if that comes up in the logs. Wonder why that would be.
Yeah, this would be interesting to see what we can see in the application logs, and we can see what's happening there, and especially why that would have worked locally, but not there in that container. The game worked. The game worked for RJ Push, but not for me. Does it work for you, Matt?
No, I mean, all I can think of is another browser, but it was working in Firefox. If I try Safari,
no, definitely not working for me. Interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, so a couple of people,
production a little bit different to my local machine.
RJ Push, do you have a specific browser that you're using? Because the weekend said that it's not working for him either. Anything showing up in the application logs?
I can navigate to the page. Nothing's coming up in the application logs, so I'll have to have a look at it later.
Click reload. Does it only pull it in every now and then? Or what about view logs in Cloudwatch? Maybe there's more up-to-date logs there.
Yeah, let's have a look.
Now, I know this week Matt and I have gone over our time a little bit, but there's nobody next, so we can keep the session open for a few more minutes.
Yeah, I'll have a quick nose. I do have something I've actually got to jump to, I did see, but I always get frustrated when things don't work, so let's have a look together.
I don't think this is a browser thing because it looks like it's just spinning.
Yeah, I mean, if I manually navigate to the page, right, I get there. So it's got to be something to do with the way that I've got the pages routed together. So I'll have to have a look at that a little bit later. Post and get.
Could it be something to do with the choice in the browser? Something, the way you've passed the choice.
Yeah, maybe like it's getting stripped because this would sit right.
It is. It is, Matt. Have a look at the request in the browser. So trying to put those. maybe the way the load balancer or the environment is configured is not enjoying passing across those non-UTF-8 characters in the URL. So delete the character off your URL.
Yeah, it only worked when I added the character, right? And if I go shows rock.
Well, quickly fix the app and we'll redeploy. We'll see how long it takes.
Yeah, I do actually have to jump though.
Okay. We'll fix it up and we'll put the repo on the video and we'll go ahead and share that as well.
Yeah,
and maybe it would be better to change to posts rather than sending across information in gets.
Yeah, potentially. The other thing is if it's like just a character thing, I can probably just like convert those characters to rock, paper, or scissors, or kind of like do something with them to make them a little bit more standard for passing through URLs, or maybe I've got to do something on the load balancer. I'll check it out. Yeah, I'll definitely have a look at that later today. Maybe what we can do, just because I've got to run and have lunch with my sister, I'll cover it at the very start of next week. So I'll get it working so everyone can play next week. So we'll be here same time next week. Lunchtime in Melbourne. So 12 p.m. AEST time on Wednesdays, we're always around. We'll take a look at it at the very start of the session, and then we'll kind of continue with what's planned for next week, I reckon. How does that sound, Paul? Yep. Yeah,
sounds great. And just thanks again for your time, Matt, this week, and thanks for everybody that's come along. There is, we're always looking at the comments that are coming up on the YouTube video. We always read your comments. We're open for suggestions. So we do have a backlog of ideas we go through, but we're really open to suggestions. What is it that you would like to see? And what would you like to see us, trial and error our way through it? And even if that's pretty fresh, maybe one day we'll do something that says at the start of the session, you decide, and then you can really try to figure it out on the fly. It's like you said.
Yeah.
But also we're open to guests. So if you're building something that's really interesting, come on the show as well. So yeah. So anyway, my shed is starting to get loud because it's starting to rain.
It's not raining my side yet, but I'm guessing I'll probably get in like 30 minutes or so. Excellent. So yeah, with all that being said, let us know in the chat if there's any particular services. I did have some people LinkedIn message me as well, so feel free to reach out to us over LinkedIn if you've got a particular subject. We're trying to line up something with Redshift. I've got an SME. Someone asked for Redshift. I've got an SME that's on holidays at the moment, but when she gets back, we're definitely going to have her on the show, for example. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch you next week, 12 p.m. AEST Wednesdays.
All right, take care all. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.